Welcome you to our panel today. This session's topic is the next normal and social good. And I did have the pleasure of speaking with Lieutenant Colonel Snow from the United States Air Force, who is the CTO of Airforce, their innovation division. And perhaps what we'd like to do now is to share that screen. I understand I'm working with Maya on that video. So while we're getting that set up, we'll be talking. Oh, here we are. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here today with Lieutenant Colonel Snow, who's the CTO at Airforce at the Air Force. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I'm just super excited to be here. So many interesting things happening in the technology space today, and the topic around advancing humanity is something that I'm passionate about. So I'm just delighted to share some of the things we've been working on.
Well, we know that you're on the road, and so I'd love for you to dive in and share with us some of the latest, greatest cutting edge technology that you've been using to serve our country.
Oh, thanks for asking. So a little bit about Airforce. We were set up as an innovation arm for the United States Air Force, but we work across different spaces. So any of the services can come in and partner with us on cross-cutting collaborative solutions that benefit not just the US government and the military, but also whole of society. Many people don't realize that with the military, 80% of the work that we do up front is all about not having to go to war to begin with. And a lot of the technologies that spin out of this drive those positive changes for society writ large. One of the efforts we had this year that I'm really proud of was called Base of the Future. Base of the Future was built after we lost Tyndall Air Force Base in a hurricane, a Category 5 hurricane. Majority of the infrastructure, about 40% of the infrastructure was lost. Majority of the buildings were lost. Thankfully, everybody was safely evacuated and we didn't have any injuries or any deaths, but the base was gone. So as we started to look at rebuilding, we thought, let's not just rebuild it, let's build it better. And then in doing that, what kinds of technologies coming out of those efforts could really be leveraged to benefit a lot of our work overseas as well as stateside. One of the first companies we started teaming with, actually there were several that came in, they are 3D printing houses. The reason I'm so excited about this is it's not just 3D printing homes, it's 3D printing facilities. And this means you can use local materials, so the soil where you're at, they have soil scientists that will come in and register that. At the same time, you're building these homes or you're building these facilities. They're environmentally sound and smart. They will withstand hurricane force winds. You can structure them in all kinds of really innovative designs to enhance their efficiency, to scale the footprint appropriately, and they're super affordable. They built, one company that we worked with built 2 50-home communities in Mexico in just about a month. And it was amazing because these homes now will withstand floods, will withstand hurricane force winds, and people have beautiful homes that they and their family can move into. When we look at places like Puerto Rico that have been dealing with a lot of the devastation from different storms coming through time and time again, and people have lost their homes and there's a lot of poverty there, for the first time, we can give them a home that will keep them safe in the storm, will give them a place to be permanently, and to grow their families. And having that safe place to start with is the foundation for everything else that follows. Other areas that we looked at were augmented reality and virtual reality solutions. And in this case, it's not just for training, it's to be able to empathize and experience what others are living through. So there's a company that we talked to in this space that has been dealing with underrepresented narratives. And this is something that was really beautiful to me. Not having experienced certain types of discrimination, I didn't know what that felt like to walk into a room and to not be seen because of the color of your skin. That was shocking. They have a program that allows you to step into somebody else's world that is experiencing that so you can empathize and you can feel what that feels like. That was powerful. That puts everything into perspective and helps you to understand, wow, somebody that I work with feels like this. So with General Brown in place now, we're taking diversity very, very seriously and really making some big strides. Another team that we've worked with is called Bias Inc. Michelle Ruiz and her team, and we've been talking with them most recently. I'm super excited about what they're doing around bias. In this particular case, they provide you a tool to identify your individual bias and then identify organizational bias and give you the solutions, the tools that you need to overcome your own bias. It's not subjective, it's not judgmental. It's teaching us how to be our best selves. And that's something else that we're really excited about exploring more of.
What's some advice that you have for people who are women and minorities that are in technology, that are in government, perhaps from your personal perspective? And tell me, right now, you're exactly right. This is top of mind, anything D&I. So I'm glad that you brought up some of the programs that you're using and how you're leveraging technology in that regard. I would love to, of course, learn more about that. I'm sure that Silicon Harlem would love to be one of your open house locations.
That would be fantastic. Yes.
I didn't hear you say New York, so hopefully we can think about that later.
Yeah.
But
that would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be great? And they already have, they already have the infrastructure here for you. So I can see that partnership coming down.
I love it. I love it. Yes, we should definitely talk about that.
Yeah, I'm sure that that Clayton and Bruce would be more than happy to. So in closing, I know that your time is limited. Please just give us a few nuggets on how you've been able to rise to such an incredible leadership position in the government, in the world, globally. I know I can imagine how rewarding this is, and just let us know really what inspires you from day to day, because I think that you're a role model and an inspiration to so many, and we can definitely use some advice while we have you here for a few minutes.
Thanks so much, Rhonda. I've been really fortunate. My time in the Air Force has been fantastic. I've got 18 years in, and one of the biggest lessons I learned was
So that was such a treat. And thank you. Welcome back. Thank you, Clayton.
I'm sorry, I had to, I did that edit myself, which is encouraging everyone to go to our YouTube channel and see the whole interview. It's actually up to almost a 15-minute interview that Rhonda did with with JJ Snow. It's extraordinary. So please go watch the entire video at our Silicon Harlem YouTube channel. In the meantime, turn it back over to Rhonda some people were saying, why does she have two different outfits on? And the answer is, that was pre-recorded, now you're live.
Well, thank you, Clayton. That was really such a treat to be able to meet Lieutenant Colonel Snow a few days ago. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to join this panel, but we're so excited to have our panelists for the next normal and social good topic. These are people at the cutting edge. These are next generation humanitarians that are leveraging science, technology, and public policy for advancing humanity. And so to start, I would like to first give a short introduction of Dr. Canuto from the Brookings Institute. He's had a great career working at the IMF, at the World Bank, and he's particularly focused on the New South. So we'd love to hear more from him. And his achievements are very vast, but we particularly want to focus on today, what does he see happening post-COVID? And how can we use all of the great learnings from working globally to see how we can locally apply some of what he has seen in the best practices here in New York City. And John Paul Farmer has been an amazing partner with Silicon Harlem. Some of you may have seen the article yesterday that's made big news around the digital divide initiatives that the city is spearheading. And Mr. John Paul Farmer, we actually had a great experience working for President Obama together. He led the Presidential Fellows Innovations program that is institutionalized now. And not only that, he's helping cities and states also institutionalize similar programs like in New York City. So we're so excited to have them both here today. They're really just gems and leaders in this area. And so I'd like to start with Mr. Farmer to give a short overview, which he shared with some of us at the beginning of the year, the plans around closing the digital divide here in New York. But I would love to hear more about what's changed. And really, I want you to talk a little bit about, from your sphere of influence, how do you see you being able to make an impact? And how do you define advancing humanity? Thank you, Mr. Farmer.
Okay, hopefully everyone can see this screen. What I'd like to do to start is really build on top of what Lieutenant Colonel Snow said in her remarks. And obviously we should all go to that YouTube link and hear the rest of it, because her experiences are the types of things that can probably benefit us all. I hope the experiences that we've had here in New York City in the course of 2020 about using technology for social good in a really fast changing environment, and thinking about how we set up the structures to make sure that we can, as some folks like Lieutenant Colonel Snow might call it, build it better. Some politicians might call it build back better. But as we are going through this disruption, we know that we need to fix things that are broken, and we've got the opportunity to do this better than we have before. It's like when you're rebuilding a house after a hurricane, you start with the foundation, and the foundations here in New York City in our government are tech capacity, it's broadband connectivity, and it's having a good data strategy. So broadband, data, and the people who can actually implement. It's really important. I'll quickly walk through these slides that you see, if I can. There we go. So I'm going to go through three things: our rapid response, the way we use some new tech, and then the NYC Internet Master Plan that Rhonda referred to. Rapid response. We all know that back in the springtime, we had an immediate crisis, a healthcare crisis that we had to respond to. And the first thing we had to do was inform the public. We had to make sure that we could get information to people quickly where they were, meet them where they were. And so simple things, simple, fast interventions like banner ads, banners on websites, but also then ads on things like perhaps link kiosks or even on television. We then realized that we needed a front door. We needed a place that people could go to. And you've probably seen nyc.gov/coronavirus listed in lots of different places. That is the front door for information about health information, but also, alternate side parking or school information or programs to help folks who are behind on their rent. We needed a front door. So we had the front door, but we also had the no wrong door, because if you went to a banner on an ad, that could then bring you to that hub of information. We also realized that people were engaging in work and life in ways they hadn't before. So we created a work from home toolkit, digital life at home toolkit. We had clergy who were saying mass or religious services for the first time remotely. We really did see an acceleration in the trend that we already knew was here, which was the increasing the online nature of life and work. And that accelerated in the springtime and is likely to stay in some ways a more digital life in the years ahead. We also realized that internally the city needed to make more data-driven decisions. And these were life and death decisions, things like where we had PPE and where we didn't. So we built dashboards that brought together data sources that had never been combined before. And that's been used for PPE, for isolation hotels, for test and trace. We also realized that there's outside data. And my colleague, Kelly Jin, the Chief Analytics Officer of the city, has stood up the Data Recovery Partnership, working with outside organizations who are donating data that can be combined with city-held data so the city can make the best decisions possible. But we realized it wasn't just about the simple, quick wins. It was also about the new tech. New tech needed to be created. And there's been a lot of conversation about contact tracing. And contact tracing is actually a long-standing epidemiological effort. There was some interest in the springtime about what role technology could play here. And we researched this, we dug into it, and quickly realized that the contact tracing really did need to be people, human beings who were trained. What technology could do is to augment, to help them. And so we started thinking more about exposure notification technology as opposed to contact tracing. So the contact tracing is the people, really important function. If you ever have a reason to be contacted by New York City's contact tracers, it's important that you engage with NYC Test and Trace. Exposure notification is a really promising tool in the toolkit. And we looked at what was done in Singapore, in Canada, and just recently, New York State came out with its own product, working in collaboration with private sector companies like Google and Apple. And it's so important that this technology, because it is new, that it be trusted. That's why we focused on digital rights, on making sure that people can trust technology, making sure they understand that their privacy is being protected, that data is only being used in proportional ways, in the appropriate ways to keep them safe, and there's accountability for the people and the organizations that hold that data. In many cases, that data is not indefinite. That data actually does have an end date and will be destroyed when it's no longer needed. So the importance of making sure people can trust technology because they know that their digital rights are being protected. If you'd like to learn more about this, you can go to citiesfordigitalrights.org, which is a global partnership of over 50 cities that New York City, Barcelona, and Amsterdam created together. Now, the New York City Internet Master Plan. I mentioned that broadband is important. Well, broadband, we believe, is as essential in 21st century New York as electricity was in the prior century. And we said this back in January, and I had a chance to join Silicon Harlem and talk through this groundbreaking document back then. And then just a couple months later, COVID hit, and it frankly took something that people thought was a nice to have in some circles, and it made clear to everybody just how essential this really is. That it's not just the morally right thing to do, which it is. We should help every person and every family in New York City get online. It's also an economic development issue. It is a public health issue. This is something that we simply cannot put off any longer, and we can't allow the status quo to exist because there has been digital redlining. We've seen that the parts of New York City that are lower income, the parts of New York City that are more likely to be majority people of color, those are the parts of New York City who've been served the least, who have the least broadband adoption, where broadband is the least affordable. You're looking right now at the differences across the city in combined home and mobile broadband. And then on the right, where commercial fiber choice exists. And you can see in that on the right, the investment has gone into Midtown Manhattan, downtown Manhattan, a little bit in downtown Brooklyn, and so much of the city and so many of our business districts around the city. When we think about the need to compete online, that everyone now is competing with the big global players. The mom and pop shops need to be able to compete too. They need choice as well. So we started acting in phases. As rapid response, phase one, after shipping 300,000 tablets to school kids, great work done in a really difficult situation by the Department of Education there. We focused on some of the most vulnerable people during the COVID pandemic, older adults living in NYCHA housing. And we delivered 10,000 tablets to them. What was so important is it wasn't just the tablets that went to these folks in 288 different communities around the city. It was also the digital inclusion, the coaching, the support that so often is necessary when people are getting connected for the first time. We've got some amazing stories here of people being able to get their groceries, being able to visit with their doctor, and really importantly, being able to connect with their families and do it safely from home. The second phase was a rapid response request for expressions of interest. This is following up and following through on the Internet Master Plan's promise to engage and partner with private sector companies and community-based organizations. So we issued this rapid response RFEI and we got 30 responses back very quickly. Of those, a number of them are moving forward into licensing to put equipment into NYCHA facilities where it didn't exist before and to deliver low-cost service. We're talking about service ranging from free in some cases to $15 or $20 a month, a fraction of what the prevailing market prices are, making this much more affordable to tens and tens of thousands of New Yorkers. And where we are now is we're on the cusp of issuing a citywide RFP, or request for proposals. And this is really taking the RFEI and the success that we saw proved out there and that the mayor saw proved out there. And he said, we need to do this at scale and we need to do it quickly. We need to accelerate the implementation of the Internet Master Plan. So he committed $157 million in capital dollars to infrastructure, making sure we have open access, conduit, and fiber, so that more companies, small businesses, community-based organizations can come in and compete and offer competitive, low-cost products. What's also really important here is it's not just money going into fiber in the ground, it's also the city's assets, hundreds of thousands of micro assets around the city. Think of rooftops and poles and bus shelters, fire department call boxes, putting those on the table so that organizations can come to the city and tell us how they would use that productively to close the digital divide. That's never been done before. And this is being done, both of these things, the scale of the asset coordination, the investment of dollars, both of those are record setting in terms of the level of municipal involvement in closing the digital divide. This plan's been called a lot of nice things. And you heard earlier from Vince Cerf. That was one of the most important, in my mind, endorsements that we received, but also folks like Larry Irving, Gigi Sohn, Blair Levin, fantastic experts in this field who looked at what New York City is doing and gave it the thumbs up. And so we know we're on the right track. And when I look back at what we've done in 2020, I see a playbook that others can emulate. And we've got to build more tech capacity in governments, in our communities and society. We need to respond to immediate needs. So you don't always have the luxury of time, of waiting it out, of following the timeline that you'd expected. Sometimes you need to be able to respond quickly. And while you're doing that, it's so important that you get out of the reactive mode. We start looking ahead and around corners. And as soon as we have a handle on the immediate crisis, as we were facing back in March and April, we started looking ahead at what we need to do next. And to do that well, you're going to leverage digital tools, because digital tools work at scale. But as you build these digital tools, you've got to keep in mind the people who are going to use them. Who are these people? What do they need? How do they use things? And to the extent that you can talk and test with real users, you're going to get better outcomes. And then the last thing is really based in humility. And that's recognizing that nothing is ever perfect. And we're always improving and we're always iterating. And that's what we continue to do here in New York City. We're improving and iterating based on what we've learned. Every day we're working to serve the people of New York better through technology and innovation. So thanks so much for listening to me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you very much, John Paul, for everything you're doing to close that gap. You reminded me when you mentioned the business improvement districts that years ago, when I first started working with Silicon Harlem, I was managing the Jamaica Business Improvement District in Queens, which is the largest in what would be the fourth or fifth biggest city if Queens was a standalone on its own. And with 500-600 businesses in downtown Jamaica, we did not have broadband. And so we implemented a strategy around technology, tourism, and transportation, with technology being paramount. And we were able to successfully work with the city and state to bring broadband and funding. And I'm hoping that we can continue to find where the pockets are throughout the city and start to prioritize and working together with the community-based organizations, continue to further that work. Because really, I just think that is in order for us to really compete in the digital economy, this is what we need as a foundation. And and to empower our residents, our businesses, our students. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, that you're rebooting this project. And I am so happy also to have today Dr. Otaviano Canuto, who is a prolific writer. He's written about global development, and we all know how connected we are here, especially after the pandemic. So let's see if we can learn from one another and all the work that you're doing, especially running the think tank now about the New South. Mr. Canuto is originally from Brazil, but he's working in tandem with Morocco and other countries that are also fighting the digital divide. So thank you, and we would love to hear from you now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Rhonda, for having me here. And I have really enjoyed the whole discussion since early this morning. So I guess a common thread in all talks has been how the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated key technology trends. We heard a reference to telehealth, robotics, supply chain 4.0, 3D printing by Lieutenant Snow. We also saw reference to remote work, distance learning, and so on. So these technologies that have been accelerated, they will have a long-lasting impact beyond COVID-19, and they will be part of the new normal landscape. Well, we have seen several dimensions of the bright side of that technology acceleration, but how benign will be that impact will depend a lot on what societies do to make sure that those technological changes do not worsen some of the pre-existing challenges accentuated by the COVID-19 crisis. That is to say, what will governments and civil society do to guarantee that those technology trends lead to a social good, as in the name of the session? Lord Merlin Hay remarked that technology is a carrier, a vehicle. And the point I want to make here is that whether that will be a carrier to the good or the bad will depend a lot on whether we have a neglect or a proactive stance taken by public policies. Let me illustrate this by referring to social inclusion. COVID-19 will leave a legacy of income concentration everywhere, as the economic effects have been harder at the bottom of the income pyramid. Restrictions on mobility have affected particularly those workers who need it for a living, and only a fraction of the occupations can be performed remotely from home. Voluntary or mandatory social distancing has also impacted workers associated to service that need personal contact. Tourism, hospitality, personal service, and so on. Labor-intensive businesses such as retail, food, and logistics have been the worst hit. Concerns about distance learning also include the possibility the technologies could create a wider divide in terms of digital readiness and income level. There have been reference to this. And importantly to remark that distance learning, for instance, could also create economic pressure on parents, more often women, who need to stay home to watch their children and may face decreased productivity at work. The point is that don't take some of these transformations that we have watched in the recent past as something temporary. We're not gonna go back to where we were. And it's important to highlight, by the way, that those negative impacts of COVID-19 have been particularly gender differentiated, age differentiated, and ethnic differentiated. Some time ago, when I was at the vice president at the World Bank, we did produce a long report about gender equality and economic development, and showed, for instance, the inequality of responsibilities regarding household chores. Even if we estimated and saw how the huge disparity among countries, but even, let's say, Scandinavian countries, where the inequality, gender inequality in that respect is the smallest, it still was considerable. In the case of age, younger people and the impact on schooling as a result of lack of digital readiness for part of the population has also been acute. Jobs. Some of the occupations will not return, either because of prolonged restrictions on supply and consumer demand, and or because of the speeding up of technology trends. Just to give an idea, referring to a study done by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics some time ago, referring to 2017 and 2018, that is to say before the pandemic and the consequence in terms of shift in work patterns, 25% of wage and salary workers were able to occasionally work from home. And workers with college educations were at least 5 times more likely to have jobs that allow them to work from home compared to people with high school diplomas. The fact is that there is an inverse correlation between the proximity of the bottom of the income pyramid and the ability to work remotely. Prolonged unemployment and lower earnings will be an issue ahead. So the proactiveness of public policies with respect to reskilling part of the labor force will be of the essence. Infrastructure coverage has also been mentioned. Michelle spoke of a gap of coverage. She referred to 18% as a probably underestimated parcel of the population lacking infrastructure coverage. And there is also, let me refer to another of the new technology trends accelerated by COVID, which will have an impact all over the world, which is the evolution towards digital payments. Just to give an idea, there are more than 1.7 billion unbanked people in the world who may not have easy access to digital payments. And obviously the availability of digital payments also relies on internet availability, device, and the network to convert cash into a digitalized format. So the issue of social inclusion entangles with the issue of digital readiness. Building the necessary infrastructure in a comprehensive way so as to cover the whole population is of the essence to make it a trajectory towards the good or the bad. Laws and regulations must be updated to accommodate remote work. And I would also include the need to have further psychological studies to understand the effect of remote work on people. 5G and information and communications technology come to the fore. They have been mentioned. All the technology trends mentioned along the debate today rely on a stable, high-speed, and affordable internet. And the adoption of 5G will likely increase the cost of compatible device and the cost of data plans. So addressing these issues to ensure inclusive access to internet will continue to be a challenge as the 5G network expands globally. 200 million people will lose their jobs worldwide due to COVID-19. How to mitigate the impact on the larger workforce and the most vulnerable is the issue across all industries and countries that deserves not only attention, but also a timely and human-centered solution. We cannot simply watch the public sectors to neglect, to cross their arms with respect to such a challenge. Addressing both digital readiness and social inclusion, both together, will be necessary to make sure that the next normal will be something close to social good. Thank you.
If I can just chime in and agree. I know it's often more interesting when panelists disagree, but I just want to agree with so much of what Dr. Canuto just said, that we are facing these disparate impacts that have affected people in our community differently, depending on where they live, what kind of job they have, level of education, age, and certainly we see different impacts across race and gender. And so that means that our response has to take that into account. And in the city, we have identified COVID priority neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods that have been hit hardest by both the combination of the health and the economic impacts in 2020. And it's why when we look at the New York City Internet Master Plan, it's important that we communicate that it's not just about the technology. The New York City Internet Master Plan is a 5G connectivity plan. It's looking at where we go with our connectivity infrastructure from here. It's an economic development plan, looking at how we can actually produce ROI and benefit across our community with a focus on those who have benefited the least in the past. And finally, it's a digital equity plan. It really is focused on ensuring that we close this digital divide once and for all. And we have a playing field that is more level than it's ever been before. And that simply takes, it takes a new approach, because the status quo is not going to get us there for the points, the reasons that Dr. Canuto mentioned. We aren't going back, we're going forward into a new world. The question is, what do we want that world to look like? And what are we willing to do to make it what we want it to be?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Farmer and Dr. Canuto. I'd like you to just comment a little bit beyond how you define the theme of this conference, advancing humanity. We talked about a few particular areas to focus on, obviously digital divide, I also had the pleasure of working with Mr. Irving in the 90s when he first coined that term. And it seems to me that everyone's in agreement about this particular issue. I'd love, from your perspective, you've had many experiences, these panelists, from government to private sector. How else can we define advancing humanity in respect to leveraging technology to do that? And then I would also love, if we can, to open up, if anyone has any questions, because we only have, I think, about 5 or 6 minutes left. I'd love to open up to anyone. Feel free to put your question into the Q&A and we'll put it in the queue. Thank you. And would you like to comment first, Dr. Canuto?
Yes, Rhonda, and indeed, I fully agree with John that what he showed about what's being done in New York City is it's a good omen in the sense that to show how public policy can be geared at addressing the challenge put by not only COVID but also technology itself. And that's the point. Please don't look simply to technology as it is self-contained, as if having the technology is something for the good. We have watched in the world over the last 2 decades, particularly, how prosperity has been accompanied by also rising income disparity. Look at the figures of income distribution in this country. Look at the figures of what is happening in the whole world. Look at the prospects laid out by the IMF this Wednesday, this week, about how the world will be at the end of next year is still below income levels, per capita income levels, particularly in some parts of the world to last year. So we do have a major problem. Don't look only to the bright side of technology. It has to be accompanied by proactive public policies. One thing that the coronavirus crisis showed clearly was the need to boost social protection systems, is the need to address the underlying income inequality that has been made even worse. So my hammer here is on, there is a bright side, but there is also a malign side. Pay attention to both.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to add to that, just that as we know, technologies are dual use. They can be used for good or for bad. That's why we have adopted principles here in New York City about how we adopt and deploy technology. So those principles are equity, performance, affordability, privacy, and choice. That last one's really important. People should have choice and agency in this process. But ultimately, we're using technology not for technology's sake. We're using it to make lives better. We're using it to improve the human condition and to empower people to have a better life.
Well, thank you for rounding out that. Dr. Canuto, did you want to comment?
Just to reinforce what John said, and keep in mind, we need boosting social protection systems, and we need reskilling of the substantial part of the labor force that has been left out more recently with the dramatic technological change that have already taken place. Look at the Midwest and look at the whole issue of people left out of the job. The levels of structural unemployment are rising and they will not come down easily. So we have to have governments taking action to help solve this quandary on how to reintegrate people that have been left out.
And, on that note, we did just receive a question regarding whether New York City would be able to help reskill the struggling restaurant workers. So I'd like to open up and just, I'll quickly mention rapid fire just because I think we have 3 minutes. We have 3 questions. So if you'd like to comment on that. I think that there was also a request regarding the link, John Paul, that you suggested. I think there were some city links that you maybe referenced in your presentation. If we can add that into the chat. And lastly, but very importantly, I think that also, in terms of advancing humanity, we are looking at health and quality of life a lot more acutely when we talk about how can technology really advance humanity and put health and the individual a more human-centered approach, including our air quality. And so there was a question about that, if anybody would like to comment on how we can improve our indoor air quality. We know we're spending a lot more time inside these days, and would love to hear your thoughts also in general about health tech.
So there is a lot there. I'll try to touch on a few of those pieces, starting with the last part, which is that people are realizing more than they ever have before the importance of air quality and the fact that we need to keep our air filters updated, and we need to update as the technology improves. A lot of that work has been happening. A lot of that retrofitting has been going on ever since this pandemic hit in the springtime. I think we're going to see much more of that, and hopefully there's a little bit of a silver lining here. Hopefully that focus has a benefit beyond reducing vulnerability to COVID. Hopefully it actually has other health benefits if we have cleaner air to breathe throughout our lives, if folks with asthma have cleaner air to breathe, small children do, because we're making these changes now, because we're all much more aware of it than folks were before. In terms of upskilling, absolutely agree that that's going to be essential, that the folks who've been hit the hardest are primarily people in service industries, things that are face-to-face, things like going to a restaurant or a clerk at a store or a cashier. And those are also jobs that are vulnerable to some amount of automation. And as AI and machine learning just automate more and more of the work that gets done in lots of different workplaces, those are the types of jobs that are especially vulnerable. So as Dr. Canuto mentioned, we can't expect that the same jobs that were around a year ago are going to come back a year from now. That's just not going to be the case. So we need to make sure that we've got the tools and the systems in place to reskill folks who need to get a new skill. And in reality, this is going to be an experience that more and more Americans, but people all over the world have in the course of their careers. So it might not be something that happens every couple of years, but maybe once or twice in a career, people are going to need to make a pivot. And to make that pivot, we need to have the support in place. We need to have the availability of training that is relevant to the jobs that actually are likely to be available in the coming decade plus. But we also need to make sure that the financing structures are available, that people aren't exploited, that people don't fall prey and end up going deep into debt just to get a new skill, when this is going to be more and more common and necessary. So we need to think about how we finance things. I think one of the interesting examples from here in New York City is the work that Pursuit is doing. Pursuit's a nonprofit based in Queens, run by Juke Su. And Pursuit is working on ISAs, income share agreements. And those need to be done appropriately with kind of guidelines and the boundaries to make sure that they don't end up exploiting anybody, but they are an interesting and promising way of aligning incentives. And I think the work that Juke and Pursuit are doing are a good example of that here in New York, where they're making upskilling more available to more people, and they're coming up with clever, interesting ways of how to finance that for folks who don't have the money in their bank account and don't want to go deep into debt.
With respect to the health, there was another question that came just about 5G and the impacts. What's the latest that we're seeing there?
The city's focus on 5G, and 5G, folks know, is the 5th generation of wireless telecommunications equipment. So 5G is faster, broader bandwidth, and lower latency. So it could enable a bunch of innovations that we haven't really experienced broadly in society today. It's important that those innovations be available broadly to everybody, that it be equitable, that it not just be reserved for the top 1% of the income bracket. It's got to be available broadly. And so the focus the city is taking is making sure that that technology is widely available and that it's safe, that public safety is taken into account, that the benefits for health or education are at the forefront. And that's the approach that New York City is taking. I know there have been some concerns expressed about the impact of the radio frequency itself, millimeter wave, for example. There is no evidence that I have seen that is actually an issue that people should be concerned about. We'll obviously keep an eye out, and we will follow the recommendations of the experts in terms of health. But as of now, that is not something that we believe to be a concern.
Thank you very much, John Paul, and we look forward to partnering with you and continuing to see your incredible work around the city. And to close us out, I would love Dr. Canuto to share a few of his thoughts on any of the questions from the audience. Thank you, Dr. Canuto.
Oh, thank you, Rhonda, for this. I guess the questions have all been convergent to the point that both John and I remarked, that is to say, there's no automaticity. It's not, one cannot take for granted that the availability of new technology trends will cater naturally to the bottom of the pyramid. To a large extent, the COVID-19 has reinforced, has accelerated history in the sense that it has shown to all of us the need to have more cooperation among countries, including to face the major challenge faced by mankind in the future. This is not going to be the last epidemic. This is not the pandemic. Each and every problem faced by mankind, be it climate change, be it how to deal with cybersecurity and so on, they will need cooperation. They will need working together rather than the inward orientation that has prevailed as a response to COVID-19. I guess we should all keep this in mind to avoid, let's say, that the current tragedy stays impeding us to face those challenges. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, all.
And I want to say thank you too. This was an extraordinary panel. I was very impressed with everyone's comments, including JJ Snow. But the in depth, if you will, or the amount of data and statistics and facts. I mean, Canuto's a walking computer. I mean, I don't know how you do it. That's just amazing. And of course, John Paul Farmer, one of my dudes, made a presentation on the blueprint in Silicon Harlem in January. I think it was one of his first public speaking of the blueprint. So we are very proud to see the progress that's been made here in New York City based on a lot of his vision, and we support it wholeheartedly. Thank you, guys. We're going to move on to